Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information presented in this video regarding divorce rates, legal trends, and statistical data in the United States Midwest is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, financial counseling, or professional psychological consultation. Marriage laws vary significantly by state, and individual circumstances require personalized professional guidance. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney or qualified professional in their jurisdiction before making any decisions based on historical trends or statistical models discussed in this presentation. While the rest of the country watches Hollywood scandals and coastal drama, a quiet tectonic shift is happening in the American heartland that no one is talking about. We have been told for decades that the national divorce rate is hovering around 50%, but in the Midwest, that number is a lie. If you live in Ohio, Illinois, or Iowa, the reality of who stays together and who falls apart is being rewritten by factors that would baffle someone living in New York or Los Angeles. Right now, there is a specific statistical danger zone for Midwestern couples that peaks not at the 7-year itch, but at a point so specific and so tied to regional economic shifts that it is catching an entire generation off guard. We are seeing a massive divergence where certain zip codes in the Great Lakes region are seeing record-breaking marital stability, while just 3 counties over, the social fabric is unraveling at a rate that rivals the highest peaks of the 1980s. By the end of this deep dive, you will understand the hidden Midwest metric that predicts marital outcomes better than any personality test ever could. This video is designed to solve a critical problem for the American audience: the lack of hyperlocal, data-driven context. We are moving past the surface-level tropes of flyover country to give you a masterclass in how geography, industrial legacy, and regional cost of living indices actually dictate the longevity of your most personal relationships. You are going to learn why the Corn Belt has become a fascinating laboratory for social scientists, and what these historical trends mean for the future of the American family unit. To understand the current landscape, we have to look at the Midwest as a unique cultural and statistical entity. This region, encompassing 12 states including Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, and Wisconsin, has historically been viewed as the anchor of values for the United States. However, when we analyze the U.S. Census Bureau's American Community Survey data from the last decade, a much more complex picture emerges. We aren't just looking at a monolith. We are looking at a fragmented map of marital outcomes. Let's examine the great divergence within the Midwest. If we look at the historical trends from 2010 to 2024, the Midwest generally maintains a lower divorce rate than the South and the West, but that doesn't tell the whole story. For example, consider the state of Illinois. When you isolate the data for Cook County and compare it to rural Gallatin County, you see a statistical variance that is staggering. The urban-rural divide in the Midwest is one of the most significant predictors of divorce velocity. In high-density urban centers like Chicago, Indianapolis, or Detroit, we see delayed entry into marriage, which statistically leads to lower divorce rates later in life. Conversely, in rural manufacturing towns that have seen a decline in industrial output, we see a phenomenon known as economic stress loading. Economic stress loading is a term social scientists use to describe how the disappearance of stable, blue-collar jobs impacts the household. In the 1950s and 60s, a single income from a manufacturing plant in Ohio could support a family of 5. Today, as those plants have shuttered or moved, the domestic pressure has shifted. Case studies from the Rust Belt regions of Michigan and Ohio show a direct correlation between the closure of a major employer and a spike in divorce filings within a 24 to 36-month window. This isn't just a coincidence. It is a measurable statistical outcome. When the economic floor of a community drops, the marital ceiling often follows. However, it is not all grim. There is a counter-trend happening in what we call the Silicon Prairie. In states like Nebraska and Iowa, particularly in tech hubs like Lincoln or Des Moines, divorce rates are actually trending downward. This is largely attributed to what sociologists call the success sequence. In these specific Midwestern pockets, residents are following a pattern of graduating from post-secondary education, securing employment in the growing tech or agricultural science sectors, and delaying marriage until their late 20s. The data shows that for every year a Midwesterner waits to get married after the age of 25, their potential for a lifelong union increases by a measurable percentage. We also have to discuss the legacy effect of the Midwest. Historically, The region has been influenced by strong religious and communal ties that act as a social glue. In states like North Dakota and Minnesota, the influence of Lutheran and Catholic communal structures has historically provided a buffer against divorce. But even here, the data is shifting. We are seeing a rise in gray divorce throughout the Midwest. This refers to couples over the age of 50 who are ending long-term marriages. While younger generations are getting married less frequently but staying together longer when they do, the older demographic in the Midwest is seeing a historical uptick in filings. Why is this happening now? One factor is the asset realization trend. In many Midwestern states, the cost of living has remained relatively low compared to the coasts, allowing for significant accumulation of home equity and retirement savings. As the social stigma surrounding divorce fades, even in traditionally conservative Midwestern communities, older couples who find themselves in empty nests are more likely to seek a legal separation to pursue independent lives with their portion of the accumulated wealth. This is a massive shift from the 1990s, where the economic fear of losing the family farm or the suburban home often kept unhappy couples under the same roof. To truly grasp the magnitude of these trends, we need to look at the specific legal frameworks that define the Midwest. Unlike some states on the West Coast that have streamlined, almost automated divorce processes, many Midwestern states maintain more rigorous procedural requirements. For instance, in Wisconsin, there is a mandatory 120-day waiting period from the time of filing to the final judgment. These cooling-off periods are a hallmark of Midwestern legislative philosophy, intended to reduce impulsive filings. Statistically, these waiting periods do result in a small but significant percentage of dismissed cases, where couples reconcile before the clock runs out. This regional legislative approach creates a different statistical curve than what you would see in a state like Nevada. As we move forward in this deep dive, we are going to break down the specific risk quartiles of the Midwest. We will look at how your specific career path, whether you are in the agricultural sector, the healthcare industry of the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, or the automotive legacy of Detroit, statistically influences your marital trajectory. We aren't just looking at numbers on a page. We are looking at the heartbeat of America. The Midwest is often called the bellwether for the rest of the country, and what the divorce trends here are telling us today is a preview of where the American family is headed in the next decade. If you think this is just about failed relationships, you are missing the bigger picture. This is about economics, geography, and the changing definition of the American dream in the 21st century. To truly understand the Midwestern divorce landscape of 2026, we have to look at the data through the lens of the Great Education Divide. In states like Wisconsin and Minnesota, we are seeing a statistical chasm opening up between those with four-year degrees and those without. Historically, the Midwest has been the backbone of the American middle class, but in 2026, the stability of that middle class is increasingly dictated by educational attainment. According to recent longitudinal studies, a couple in Madison, Wisconsin, where both partners hold a master's degree, faces a statistically lower probability of divorce, roughly 12% over a 20-year period, compared to a couple in a nearby manufacturing hub like Beloit, where the probability jumps to nearly 38%. This isn't just a number. It represents a fundamental shift in how social capital is distributed across the Great Lakes. Imagine a couple named David and Elena living in a suburb of Indianapolis in 2026. David works in logistics management for one of the massive automated distribution centers that have cropped up along the I-70 corridor. Elena is a specialized nurse practitioner at a regional health network. On paper, they represent the modern Midwestern success story. They married in their late 20s, they have a manageable mortgage, and they have invested in their local community. Statistically, David and Elena are part of the marriage oasis. Their dual income status provides a buffer against the inflationary pressures that have historically triggered marital friction. In 2026, the primary driver of divorce in the Midwest is no longer just irreconcilable differences. It is the accumulated stress of volatile markets. Because David and Elena have diversified their income and delayed their marriage until they achieved financial baseline stability, they are bucking the national trend. However, just 60 miles away, we see a completely different case study. Imagine a couple in a smaller, rural town in east-central Indiana. Let's call them Brian and Jessica. Brian worked for a Tier 2 automotive supplier that transitioned to electric vehicle components in 2024, but the recent 2025 market correction led to significant layoffs. Jessica works in the service sector. In 2026, the economic pressure on Brian and Jessica is not just about the bills. It is about the erosion of the provider identity. In the Midwest, the cultural expectation for a stable, single-earner household persists more strongly than it does on the West Coast. When that economic floor is pulled out, the statistical likelihood of a divorce filing increases by 25% within the first 18 months of job loss. This is the Rust Belt reality that continues to haunt the region's statistics. Let's look at the specific data coming out of Ohio. In 2026, Ohio has become a fascinating case study for divorce migration. We are seeing a trend where younger couples are moving into the Intel Alley near Columbus for high-tech jobs. These couples are bringing with them a different set of marital expectations. They utilize premarital mediation and financial planning as a standard part of their engagement process. The data shows that Ohio counties with high concentrations of tech and research jobs have seen a 7% decrease in divorce filings over the last 3 years. Meanwhile, in the southern Appalachian foothills of the state, the divorce rate remains stubbornly high, frequently tied to the intergenerational cycle of early marriage. In these regions, the median age for first marriage remains 22, whereas in the Columbus suburbs, it has climbed to 29. The data is clear. For every year a Midwestern couple delays marriage between the ages of 18 and 30, their statistical risk of divorce drops by approximately 8%. We must also address the cost of exit in 2026. The financial mechanics of a Midwestern divorce have changed drastically due to the real estate market shifts of the early 2020s. In cities like Des Moines or Omaha, the locked-in mortgage phenomenon is actually keeping couples together longer than they might otherwise stay. If a couple in 2026 holds a mortgage rate from 2021 at 3%, the prospect of divorcing and having to finance two separate households at current 2026 rates is a massive deterrent. This has led to the rise of cohabitation divorce, where couples are legally separated but continue to live in the same residence for financial survival. Statistically, we are seeing a spike in delayed filings. Couples who have been emotionally separated for years but wait until a specific financial milestone, such as the sale of a shared asset or the graduation of a child, to pull the trigger. In Michigan, the data shows a unique trend related to legal accessibility. Michigan has moved toward more robust online dispute resolution systems. In 2026, a couple with no minor children and limited assets can complete a virtual divorce in some jurisdictions in under 90 days. This ease of access has led to a velocity spike. When the barrier to exit is lowered, the frequency of filings often increases, even if the underlying social reasons for the divorce haven't changed. We are tracking a 4% increase in impulse filings in Michigan counties that have fully digitized their family court systems compared to those that still require in-person mediation. This brings us to the Midwest mentality toward reconciliation. Unlike the more individualistic cultures found in the Sun Belt, Midwesterners still show a higher statistical preference for marriage counseling. In 2026, data from regional professional associations suggests that Midwestern couples are 15% more likely to seek professional intervention before filing for divorce than their counterparts in the South. This persistence factor is why the Midwest often appears more stable in national rankings, even when economic conditions are identical to other regions. It is a cultural buffer that social scientists are still trying to quantify fully. Consider the impact of the Great Wealth Transfer on the 2026 Midwest divorce statistics. As the baby boomer generation in states like Iowa and Nebraska begins to pass down significant agricultural land and family business assets to Gen X and millennials, the complexity of the marital estate has skyrocketed. We are seeing a massive increase in the use of postnuptial agreements across the Midwest. Farmers in 2026 are no longer just relying on a handshake. They are using sophisticated legal instruments to protect multi-generational land from being fractured in a divorce settlement. This protective legalism is a direct response to the statistical reality that a single divorce can wipe out a century of family land accumulation. But what happens when the traditional Midwestern support systems fail? What happens when the social glue of the church or the local union is no longer enough to hold a household together under the weight of 21st century pressures? We are starting to see a new pattern emerge in the 2026 data. A pattern that involves a specific time of year and a specific type of financial trigger that almost no one sees coming. There is a seasonal spike in Midwestern divorce that defies national logic, and it is rooted in the deep agricultural and industrial cycles of the region. As we move into the next part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the dark side of the data. We are going to examine the hidden legal loophole that is currently being used in Illinois and Missouri to circumvent traditional asset division and why this one legal strategy is causing a massive ripple effect through the Midwestern court system. You need to know how the valuation gap in 2026 is leaving thousands of Midwesterners with pennies on the dollar during their settlements. If you think your assets are protected by standard state laws, what we reveal in the next section will change everything you thought you knew about the Midwestern legal landscape. The valuation gap is not a mere accounting error. It is a systemic discrepancy that has become the defining feature of Midwestern divorce proceedings in 2026. To understand this, we must first look at the state of Missouri, a jurisdiction that follows the principle of equitable distribution. Many people mistakenly believe equitable means equal, but in the Missouri court system of 2026, equitable means fair based on a complex set of historical trends and contribution metrics. Imagine a character named Thomas who lives in St. Louis. Thomas spent 15 years building a specialized precision machining firm that services the aerospace industry. His wife, Linda, managed the household and contributed to the social networking required to land major municipal contracts. In 2026, the valuation of Thomas's business is caught in a vice. The book value based on 2024 assets is high, but the 2026 market reality, defined by higher labor costs and shifting supply chains, means the business's actual liquid value is significantly lower. This creates the first major trap, the appraisal lag. In a 2026 Missouri divorce, the court often relies on appraisals that may be 6 to 9 months old. In a volatile economic climate, that 6-month gap can result in a valuation discrepancy of 15 to 20%. If Thomas is ordered to buy out Linda's share based on an outdated, inflated appraisal, he may find himself in a position where the potential outcome is a technical insolvency of the very business meant to provide for both parties' futures. This is why we are seeing a record number of cases where Midwestern business owners are pushing for long-term payout structures rather than lump sum settlements. The data shows that in 2026, nearly 40% of high-asset divorces in the St. Louis metropolitan area involve some form of tiered buyout, a historical trend that was almost non-existent a decade ago. Moving across the border into Illinois, the landscape shifts toward a different kind of financial complexity: the income shares model for child support and maintenance. Illinois law was overhauled years ago, but in 2026, the income shares calculation has hit a wall due to the rise of the gig executive. Imagine a character named Sarah in Naperville. She isn't a traditional W-2 employee. She consults for 3 different startups and receives 40% of her compensation in restricted stock units and performance-based bonuses. Under the Illinois 2026 guidelines, calculating net income for the purpose of maintenance has become a forensic nightmare. The valuation gap here exists between projected earnings and realized cash flow. Historically, Illinois courts have been relatively predictable, but 2026 has introduced a new variable: the Social Security offset for public employees. The Midwest is home to massive numbers of teachers, police officers, and municipal workers who do not participate in the Social Security system, but have robust state pensions, such as the Teachers' Retirement System of Illinois. When one spouse has a massive state pension and the other has a traditional 401k and Social Security, the math doesn't align. In 2026, we are seeing a surge in the use of qualified Illinois domestic relations orders, or KILDROs. The complexity arises when the court tries to value a pension that won't pay out for 20 years against a 401k that is subject to the daily whims of the 2026 stock market. The valuation gap in these cases often leaves the non-pension holding spouse with significantly less inflation-protected security than they anticipated. Let's dive deeper into the paper-only millionaire scenario, which is rampant across the I-80 corridor through Iowa and Nebraska. Imagine a family farm owned by Mark and Rebecca. The land has been in Mark's family for 4 generations. In 2026, the land is valued at $15,000 per acre, making the 1,000-acre farm worth $15 million on paper. However, the actual net profit from corn and soybean yields in 2025 and 2026 has been squeezed by global competition and equipment debt. In a divorce, Rebecca is entitled to an equitable share of the marital portion of that land's appreciation. The problem? You cannot simply cut off 200 acres and sell them without destroying the operational viability of the entire farm. This leads to the partition by sale crisis. Historically, Midwestern judges were loath to break up family farms. However, the 2026 statistical trend shows a shift where younger, more urban-focused judges are more willing to order a sale to ensure liquidity for the departing spouse. To avoid this, we are seeing a massive uptick in operating agreements that function as a secondary layer of protection. These case studies show that the most successful resolutions in 2026 involve the departing spouse remaining a silent equity partner in the farm, receiving a percentage of annual profits rather than a lump sum buyout that would bankrupt the operation. This requires a level of post-divorce cooperation that is statistically rare, yet financially necessary in the current Midwestern economy. Another critical factor in the 2026 Midwest divorce statistics is the transmutation of assets. This is a legal concept where separate property, like an inheritance or a premarital home, is accidentally converted into marital property. In a high-stakes environment like the Minneapolis-St. Paul suburbs, we see this often with home equity infusions. Imagine a character named Jason who owned a condo before marrying Claire. During the marriage, they used Claire's salary to pay down the mortgage and used a joint tax refund to renovate the kitchen. By 2026, that condo has doubled in value. Under Minnesota's Schmidt's formula, the court must perform a grueling mathematical calculation to determine which portion of the equity is Jason's non-marital seed, and which portion is the marital growth. In 2026, with property values in the Twin Cities plateauing after years of rapid growth, the valuation gap between what Jason thinks he owns and what the court awards Claire is often the primary cause of prolonged, expensive litigation. Step by step, the 2026 appraisal process has become the most contentious phase of the divorce. It begins with the selection of the neutral. In theory, both parties agree on one appraiser. In practice, we are seeing a trend in 2026 where each party hires their own valuation expert, leading to what is known as the battle of the experts. If one expert values a family business at $2 million and the other values it at $4.5 million, the judge, who is likely not an expert in mid-sized manufacturing or agricultural economics, is often forced to split the baby. This arbitrary middle ground is the valuation gap in its purest form, and it rarely reflects the actual market reality. Furthermore, we must address the digital estate in 2026. Midwestern courts are currently grappling with the valuation of non-traditional assets like monetized social media accounts, regional influencer brands, and digital intellectual property. In 2026, a mommy blogger in Ohio or a tech reviewer in Michigan may have a brand that generates $200,000 a year in revenue. How do you value the goodwill of a person's face and personality in a divorce? Historical trends in 2026 suggest that courts are beginning to treat these as marital businesses, but the valuation methods are inconsistent at best. The gap between the current revenue and the future brand potency is a massive gray area that is currently being litigated in every major Midwestern circuit court. As we conclude this section on the financial and legal mechanics of the valuation gap, we have to look at the human cost of these numbers. When the math doesn't add up, the emotional toll spikes. We are seeing a direct correlation between valuation extremism, where one party seeks an unrealistically high value, and the total cost of the divorce. In 2026, the average contested divorce in the Midwest costs between $20,000 and $50,000 per spouse. If the valuation gap is wide enough, that cost can easily double, effectively transferring a significant portion of the marital estate to legal and forensic accounting fees. But the financial divide is only half the story. While the parents are fighting over the value of the 401k and the family farm, there is a whole other system at play that is even more rigid and, in some ways, more controversial. There is a shadow algorithm, now being used by several Midwestern states to determine the future of the children involved. This isn't just about who gets the kids on weekends. It's about a data-driven approach to parenting time that is fundamentally changing the Midwestern family structure. In the next part, we are going to dive into the custody calculators of 2026. You will see how your digital footprint, and even your smart home data, are being used in Michigan and Wisconsin courts to determine parental fitness. We will reveal the 72-hour social media rule that is currently causing thousands of parents to lose their primary residency status without ever realizing they were being monitored. If you think your private life stays private during a Midwestern divorce, what we show you in Part 4 will be a massive wake-up call. The transition from subjective judicial discretion to data-driven custody assessments is the most significant shift in the Midwestern legal landscape of 2026. Historically, a judge in a place like Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Madison, Wisconsin, would rely on the testimony of a friend of the court investigator or a guardian ad litem. These professionals would visit the home, conduct interviews, and provide a recommendation based on the best interests of the child standard. However, in 2026, that process has been augmented, and in some jurisdictions nearly replaced by what we call the Parental Responsive Quotient or PRQ. This is a statistical metric derived from your digital footprint, and it is being used to determine primary residency with a level of precision that was impossible just 5 years ago. Imagine a character named Michael, a 38-year-old software engineer living in Grand Rapids. Michael is going through a contested divorce in 2026. He views himself as a dedicated father who never misses a soccer game. However, the Michigan court system now utilizes automated digital audits during the discovery phase. Michael's legal team was blindsided when the opposing counsel introduced a PRQ report. This report analyzed 2 years of data from court-mandated parenting apps, which are now standard in almost all Midwestern filings. The data showed that while Michael attended the games, his response time to time-sensitive queries regarding his children's healthcare and school activities averaged 14 hours, whereas his spouse's response time was under 45 minutes. In the eyes of the 2026 custody algorithm, this statistical lag is categorized as a lack of executive parental function. This brings us to the 72-hour social media rule, a de facto standard that has emerged in Midwestern courtrooms over the last 24 months. While not an official statute, historical trends in 2026 show that judges in Illinois, Ohio, and Indiana are increasingly applying a digital consistency window to all custody litigants. The rule is simple but devastating. Any social media activity within 72 hours of a scheduled custody exchange is subject to extreme forensic scrutiny. If you post a photo at a social event while claiming in your parenting plan that you were engaged in child-centric preparation, the discrepancy is flagged as a behavioral inconsistency. In 2026, the court doesn't just look at the photo, they look at the metadata. If Michael in Grand Rapids posted a picture of a quiet night in, but his phone's geolocation data or a tagged post from a friend shows he was actually at a brewery in Kalamazoo 3 hours before his 6 p.m. pickup, he has violated the 72-hour window. This data is now being pulled automatically by specialized discovery software used by family law firms across the Midwest. The reach of this surveillance extends into the very walls of the home through the Internet of Evidence. Wisconsin has become a pioneer in the use of smart home forensics in family court. Imagine a character named Chloe in Madison. Chloe is fighting for primary placement of her 2 young children. Her ex-husband's legal team subpoenaed the logs from their shared smart home system, including the Nest thermostat and the Ring doorbell. In 2026, these devices are the ultimate silent witnesses. The statistical overview presented to the court showed that on the nights Chloe had the children during the temporary separation period, the smart lock logs indicated the front door was opened and closed multiple times between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. Furthermore, the thermostat data showed the house temperature was maintained at a level that the court-appointed expert deemed unsuitable for young children during a Wisconsin winter. Chloe's defense that she was just letting the dog out, or that she prefers a cold house, fell flat against the objective timestamp data. In the Midwest, where home stability is a primary metric for custody, these smart home logs are creating a new class of evidence that is nearly impossible to refute. We must also examine the rise of the surveillance subsidy. In 2026, several counties in Iowa and Nebraska have begun offering expedited court dates for couples who agree to use continuous monitoring software. This software tracks everything from the speed of the vehicle during custody exchanges to the sentiment of text messages exchanged between parents. The data is fed into a central repository that generates a monthly stability score. If both parents maintain a high score, the court remains hands-off. However, if the score dips due to aggressive language or late arrivals, the system automatically triggers a mediation hearing. This is the new reality of the Midwestern Family Unit, a high-tech, high-accountability loop where your fitness as a parent is quantified by an algorithm. The economic implications of these custody statistics are profound. In the 2026 Midwest, the difference between a 50-50 shared parenting split and a 60-40 primary residency split can mean thousands of dollars in state-specific tax credits and subsidies. For example, the Midwest homestead credit in certain states is tied directly to the primary residence of dependents. This has turned custody battles into a form of data warfare. Parents are no longer just fighting for time. They are fighting for the data points that justify their financial stability. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 show a significant increase in parents hiring private digital consultants to clean their online presence and optimize their smart home logs before filing for divorce. Step by step, The 2026 custody process involves a digital intake that would have been unrecognizable a decade ago. First, there is the social media freeze, where attorneys advise clients to deactivate all non-essential accounts. Second is the IoT audit, where every smart device in the home is cataloged for potential evidence. Third is the communication protocol, where all interactions are moved to encrypted, court-monitored platforms. This is not just about being a good parent, it is about being a good data manager. The historical trend suggests that the parent who manages their digital residue more effectively is the one who walks away with the primary residency. Furthermore, we are seeing the emergence of the geographic risk factor. In states like Missouri and Kansas, the court now considers the digital connectivity of the proposed residents. If a parent moves to a rural area with poor high-speed internet access, the court may view this as a detriment to the child's educational and social development in 2026. The data shows that in contested cases, parents living in fiber optic-enabled suburbs have a 12% higher success rate in obtaining primary residency than those in rural areas with limited connectivity. This is a staggering shift that penalizes the traditional rural Midwestern lifestyle in favor of a hyper-connected urban one. As we look at the totality of these trends, a chilling picture begins to emerge. The Midwestern divorce is no longer a private matter between two people and a judge. It is a public-facing, data-driven event where every action is recorded, analyzed, and used to determine your future. We have moved from the era of testimony to the era of telemetry, but there is an even deeper layer to this statistical shift. While your phone and your thermostat are watching you, there is another entity that is tracking a different kind of movement, one that involves the actual physical relocation of thousands of Midwesterners every single month. The 2026 data is showing a massive, unexpected migration pattern that is being triggered by divorce filings. People aren't just leaving their spouses, they are leaving their states, and they are doing it in a way that is causing a legal crisis across the region. In the next part, we are going to explore the interstate custody trap. You will learn about the jurisdictional loopholes that are being used to kidnap children legally across state lines in the Midwest, and the one specific document you must file within 48 hours of a separation to prevent your life from being uprooted. If you think the state line will protect you, Part 5 will show you exactly why you are wrong. The reality of the American Midwest is that state lines are often just a commute, not a barrier. In 2026, we are seeing a massive legal crisis known as jurisdictional arbitrage. Because cities like Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Kansas City sit so close to state borders, thousands of families live in a multi-state reality every day. You might live in Vancouver, Washington, and work in Portland, but in the Midwest you might live in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and work in Chicago, Illinois. When a marriage dissolves in these border zones, the first person to file the right document in the right state often gains a statistical advantage that can dictate the next 18 years of their life. To understand this, we have to look at the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act, or the UCCJEA. This is a set of laws adopted by almost every state, including all 12 in the Midwest, to prevent parents from state shopping for a better custody deal. However, in 2026, the historical trends show that the UCCJEA is being used as a weapon through a loophole called the 6-month residency rule. Under this rule, a state only gains jurisdiction over a child if that child has lived there for 6 consecutive months. If a parent moves a child across a state line, say from Gary, Indiana to Chicago, Illinois, and the other parent does not legally object immediately, the clock starts ticking. Once that 6-month mark is hit, the new state becomes the home state, and the legal battleground shifts entirely. Imagine a case study involving a couple named Sarah and Robert. In early 2026, they lived in a suburb of Chicago. After a heated argument, Sarah took their 2 children and moved to her parents' home in Kenosha, Wisconsin, just over the border. Robert, hoping for a reconciliation and wanting to avoid escalating the conflict, did nothing for 5 months. He continued to visit the children in Wisconsin and sent money for their support. However, in the 6th month, Sarah filed for divorce and custody in a Wisconsin court. Because the children had resided in Wisconsin for over 180 days, Illinois lost its primary jurisdiction. Robert was suddenly forced to fight his case in a different state with different laws, different child support formulas, and different judicial leanings. In 2026, Wisconsin's child support calculations and its approach to shared placement differ significantly from the income shares model used in Illinois. By waiting, Robert inadvertently allowed the potential outcome of his case to be dictated by Wisconsin's legal framework rather than his home state's. This is why the 48-hour status quo order has become the most critical tool in the 2026 Midwestern legal arsenal. In high-stakes separations, sophisticated legal teams are now filing what is known as a petition for dissolution, accompanied by an emergency motion to preserve the status quo within 2 days of a physical separation. This document does something very specific. It legally freezes the child's residence. It states that neither parent can remove the child from the current county or state without a written agreement or a court order. If Robert had filed this in Illinois within 48 hours of Sarah leaving for Wisconsin, the 6-month clock would never have started. The case would have remained firmly in Illinois, and Sarah could have been ordered to return the children to their habitual residence until a formal hearing occurred. In 2026, we are also seeing the rise of the Kansas City loophole. Kansas City is a unique statistical anomaly because it is bisected by the Missouri-Kansas state line. The legal differences between Missouri and Kansas are stark. Missouri has historically trended toward a presumption of joint physical custody, while Kansas has its own distinct set of residential guidelines and administrative subrules. A parent living on the Missouri side who anticipates a divorce might move 3 miles west into Kansas to take advantage of a specific child support cap or a different judicial view on alimony. According to 2026 regional data, there has been a 12% increase in cross-border filings in the Kansas City metropolitan area compared to 5 years ago. This isn't accidental. It is a calculated legal strategy used to find the most favorable jurisdiction. Step by step, the interstate custody trap works like this. First, one parent initiates a physical move under the guise of a temporary break or a visit to family. Second, they establish a new paper trail in the destination state, registering children for school, changing a driver's license, or securing a local lease. Third, they wait for the 183-day mark. Once that threshold is crossed, the original home state is legally deplatformed. The parent who stayed behind is now an out-of-state litigant, facing higher travel costs, the need for new local counsel, and a court system that may favor the parent who has already integrated the children into the local community. The statistical reality of 2026 shows that this isn't just happening with people moving away. It's happening with people staying put while the other parent is pushed out. In North Dakota and Minnesota, we see cases of jurisdictional eviction. This happens when one parent files for an ex parte temporary restraining order based on allegations of domestic or emotional volatility. While these orders are intended to protect victims, in a strategic divorce, they are sometimes used to physically remove a parent from the home and the state. If that parent is forced to live in a motel across the state line for months while the legal process drags on, they may inadvertently lose their residency status or their standing in a custody evaluation. The data indicates that in 2026, 18% of contested Midwestern divorces involve at least one ex parte order that significantly alters the jurisdictional landscape before a single piece of evidence is actually heard in a full trial. Furthermore, we must address the 2026 remote work relocation trend. With many Midwesterners working for coastal tech firms or global corporations, the location of the job is no longer an anchor. This has made it easier than ever for a separating spouse to claim they need to move for their career. However, Midwestern courts are pushing back. We are seeing a historical trend in Iowa and Nebraska where judges are requiring a comparative economic analysis before allowing a parent to relocate with children. The court asks, does the move provide a measurable improvement in the child's quality of life that outweighs the detriment of being further from the other parent? In 2026, I just want to move back to my hometown is no longer a sufficient legal reason in the eyes of most Midwestern family courts. The 2026 Statistical Overview reveals that the parent who acts first with a notice of intent to relocate, or a status quo order, is 60% more likely to keep the case in their preferred jurisdiction. This leads to a race to the courthouse mentality that is fundamentally changing how separations begin in cities like St. Louis and Cincinnati. It creates a high-pressure environment where there is no room for hesitation. If you think the state line will protect your rights as a parent, the 2026 data suggests that without the proper filing, that line is as thin as the paper your marriage certificate is printed on. But there is a deeper, even more invisible layer to this legal warfare. While parents are racing to the courthouse to secure jurisdiction, a different kind of algorithm is being deployed in the shadows. It's not just about where the children live. It's about the financial forensic score that is now being used to track every penny you have ever spent. There is a new digital system in place across several Midwestern states that can reconstruct your entire financial history in seconds, uncovering assets that you thought were buried forever. In the next part, we are going to expose the digital audit and the hidden asset algorithm of 2026. You will see how your Amazon purchase history, your Venmo transactions, and even your grocery store loyalty cards are being used in Illinois and Ohio to prove financial misconduct and wasteful dissipation. We will reveal the one specific digital mistake that is currently costing Midwesterners millions in lost settlements. If you think you can hide your true net worth in 2026, what we reveal in Part 6 will show you exactly how the system is designed to find every cent. The era of the manila envelope filled with bank statements is officially dead in the Midwestern legal system of 2026. Today, the cornerstone of every high-stakes divorce from Cleveland to Chicago is the financial narrative engine. This is a sophisticated suite of AI-driven forensic tools that does more than just add up columns of numbers. It reconstructs your entire physiological and social existence through your spending habits. In 2026, when a spouse in Ohio or Illinois files for discovery, they aren't just asking for tax returns. They are initiating a live-stream audit. This process involves the algorithmic ingestion of every digital transaction made over the last 5 to 7 years. It is designed to find what forensic accountants call the transactional delta, the minute, often invisible shifts in spending that signal the exact moment a spouse began preparing for an exit or diverted marital funds. Imagine a case study involving a character named John, a mid-level executive in Cleveland, Ohio. John believed he was being meticulous. For 2 years prior to filing for divorce, he had been slowly siphoning small amounts of cash, roughly $400 a month, through cashback transactions at major retailers like Meijer and Kroger. He also moved small increments of $50 to $100 into various digital wallets like Venmo and Cash App, labeling them as lunch or gas. In the 1990s or even the early 2010s, this would have been nearly impossible to track without a cost-prohibitive manual audit. But in 2026, the hidden asset algorithm used by Ohio family law firms identified a statistical anomaly in John's behavior. The AI noted that while John's reported income remained stagnant, his grocery and fuel expenditures had increased by exactly 22%, without a corresponding increase in the consumer price index for the Midwest region. This triggered a deeper dive into his digital residue. The court-ordered audit didn't just look at the totals, it looked at the metadata. It found that John's grocery loyalty card was being scanned at a Kroger location 30 miles away from his home at 10 p.m. on Tuesday nights, a time when he claimed to be at the office. This is where the 2026 legal concept of financial misconduct becomes a mathematical certainty. In Ohio, if a spouse can prove that marital assets were used for a non-marital purpose, such as supporting a secret lifestyle or an extramarital relationship, the court can award a distributive award to the other spouse to compensate for the loss. Because the algorithm proved John had diverted nearly $15,000 over 2 years, the potential outcome was a dollar-for-dollar reduction in his share of the home equity. In Illinois, this trend is even more aggressive due to the state's specific codification of wasteful dissipation. In 2026, Illinois courts utilize a 5-year look-back period for any expenditure that occurs after the marriage has undergone an irretrievable breakdown. The challenge for many Midwesterners is that the breakdown often happens long before the physical separation. Imagine a character named Amanda in Chicago. Amanda's husband began investing heavily in a private collection of high-end vintage watches in 2024. He argued these were investments for their joint retirement. However, the 2026 financial forensic audit revealed a trail of communications and insurance riders that suggested these were intended as personal, portable wealth that he could easily hide during a split. In Illinois, the court doesn't care if the asset is currently in your possession. If the purchase was deemed a dissipation of marital funds for a purely personal interest during the breakdown, the value of those watches is added back into the marital pot as if the cash were still in the bank. The most shocking development in 2026 is the grocery store and Amazon audit. Legal teams are now subpoenaing the itemized purchase histories from major retailers. This is where the one specific digital mistake, the microtransactional trail, comes into play. Many people think that by using a joint credit card for everyday items they are safe. But the 2026 algorithms cross-reference your purchase history with your claimed lifestyle. If a spouse claims in their financial affidavit that they have a $500 a month grocery budget to justify a higher maintenance request, but their Amazon and Walmart data shows they are purchasing luxury skincare, premium meal kits, and high-end electronics that they never disclosed as assets, their credibility is destroyed instantly. In the Midwest, where judges place a high value on the appearance of fiscal responsibility and traditional values, A loss of credibility on a $50 Amazon purchase can lead to a disastrous outcome on a $500,000 pension split. Furthermore, we must address the 2026 crypto forensics hurdle. In the earlier part of the decade, people used cryptocurrency as a black hole to hide wealth. In 2026, that black hole has been fitted with high-powered searchlights. Every fiat-to-crypto on-ramp in the United States is now integrated with the IRS and, by extension, the discovery tools used in civil litigation. If you moved $5,000 from a Chase Bank account in Des Moines to a Coinbase account in 2024, the 2026 audit tool will flag that transfer immediately. Even if you then move that money to a cold storage hardware wallet or an off-chain platform, the initial transactional gap remains on the ledger. The court will then place the burden of proof on you to show where that money went. If you cannot produce the wallet address or the current value, the court may engage in adverse inference, assuming the hidden asset is worth the highest possible market value it achieved during the separation period. Step by step, the 2026 digital audit involves three distinct phases. First is the aggregation phase, where all bank, credit, and digital wallet APIs are linked to the forensic software. Second is the pattern recognition phase, where the software compares your spending to regional Midwestern averages for your income bracket. Third is the anomaly reconciliation phase, where you are forced to explain every transaction that falls outside of 2 standard deviations from the norm. This is not a process you can win through cleverness. It is a process of total financial transparency. Historical trends in 2026 show that the spouse who voluntarily discloses their digital residue early in the process receives a 15% more favorable settlement on average than the spouse who attempts to hide assets and is later caught by the algorithm. The cost of these audits has plummeted as the technology has scaled. In 2026, a basic financial narrative report costs as little as $1,500, making it accessible even for middle-class divorces in smaller markets like Wichita or Fort Wayne. This means that the standard of living argument, once a subjective debate between lawyers, has become a hard data point. If the data shows that the marital unit spent an average of $8,200 a month to maintain their lifestyle in a Milwaukee suburb, the court uses that exact number as the baseline for maintenance and support. There is no more guessing. But as the financial world becomes perfectly transparent, the social world is becoming increasingly weaponized. While the AI is busy counting your pennies, another set of tools is being used to map your social influence and your moral standing within your community. In the Midwest, your reputation has a quantifiable value, and in 2026, that value is being used to swing the scales of justice in a way that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. In the next part, we are going to look at the social capital audit. You will see how your reputation score in 2026 is being calculated using your LinkedIn endorsements, your neighborhood association records, and even your participation in local Midwestern volunteer organizations. We will reveal the community witness algorithm that is currently being used in Minnesota and Wisconsin to determine which parent is more culturally aligned with the best interests of the child. If you think your social life is separate from your legal life, Part 7 will show you the hidden metric that is now deciding the fate of Midwestern families. Before we begin, a quick and important disclaimer. The information presented in this video regarding divorce trends, legal audits, and social capital metrics in the United States Midwest is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, social work consultation, or professional psychological counseling. Laws regarding privacy, discovery, and character evidence vary by state, and the application of algorithmic tools in court is an evolving legal field. Viewers are strongly encouraged to conduct their own due diligence and consult with a licensed attorney in their specific jurisdiction before making any decisions based on the historical trends or case studies discussed in this presentation. The social capital audit is the 2026 evolution of the character witness. In the past, you would bring your neighbor or your boss into court to testify that you are a good person. Today, in jurisdictions like Hennepin County, Minnesota, or Dane County, Wisconsin, the court utilizes a community witness algorithm to perform a comprehensive social capital audit. This audit does not rely on the subjective opinions of 3 friends. It analyzes your historical integration into your community over the last decade. The underlying theory is known as social continuity. In the Midwest, the legal system operates on a strong presumption that the best interests of the child are served by maintaining the highest possible level of social and communal stability. Imagine a character named Mark, a senior project manager living in the affluent suburb of Minnetonka, Minnesota. Mark is in the middle of a high-conflict custody battle in 2026. He has a clean record, a high salary, and a stable home. However, during the social capital audit, the algorithm flagged a lack of localized engagement. The system scraped data from Mark's LinkedIn, which showed he had transitioned to a fully remote role for a firm in Seattle 3 years ago. It then cross-referenced this with his local municipal participation records. While his spouse, Sarah, was a registered volunteer for the local park board and had a high sentiment score on neighborhood social platforms, Mark's digital footprint in his actual physical community was nearly non-existent. In the eyes of the 2026 Minnesota court, this is not just a personal choice. It is a statistical risk factor. The algorithm produced a reputation score that placed Mark in the bottom 30th percentile for social continuity. The potential outcome was that the court viewed Sarah as the primary anchor for the children's social and educational development, leading to a residency schedule that favored her home. This is the new reality of the Midwest. Your value as a parent is increasingly tied to your value as a neighbor. The community witness algorithm is particularly potent because it pulls from data sources that most people consider benign. In 2026, the audit includes a deep dive into HOA and neighborhood association logs. In many Midwestern developments, these associations maintain digital records of meeting attendance, fine history, and volunteer participation. If the data shows you have been a litigious or absent member of your neighborhood association, the algorithm flags this as a failure in interpersonal conflict resolution. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 show that parents who were frequently cited for HOA violations, or who had high volumes of negative interactions on neighborhood-specific apps, saw a measurable decrease in their custody standing. We must also examine the LinkedIn integration in 2026. While LinkedIn is a professional network, the Midwest legal system uses it as a proxy for social reliability. The audit tool analyzes your endorsement velocity and your recommendation reciprocity. In a 2026 case study in Waukesha, Wisconsin, a father's custody request was negatively impacted when the audit revealed he had not received a professional recommendation in 5 years. Despite working in a collaborative industry, the algorithm interpreted this as a decline in social capital, which the court then linked to his overall stability. Conversely, his spouse had a robust, active network of local professional endorsements, which the court viewed as a sign of a strong support system available to the children. Step by step, the 2026 social capital audit follows a rigorous path. First, the court appoints a digital master to oversee the audit. Second, the master grants the algorithm access to all public-facing and semi-public social and professional data. Third, the system performs a geosocial overlay, mapping your activity against your physical residence. Finally, it produces a social integration report. This report is then used by the judge as an objective baseline to compare the two parents. This is a massive departure from the 1980s or 90s, where a charming parent could sway a judge with a well-prepared speech. In 2026, the algorithm does not care about your charm. It cares about your data. The cultural alignment factor is perhaps the most controversial element of the Midwestern social capital audit. In 2026, the algorithm is programmed to weigh certain activities more heavily based on regional value sets. In the Midwest, this means things like youth sports coaching, participation in local food drives, and long-term membership in communal organizations are given a premium. A parent in Omaha, Nebraska, who coaches Little League is statistically more likely to receive a higher reputation score than one who spends the same amount of time at a private club. This is the Midwest's way of legally protecting what it views as its core identity. Historical trends suggest that this data-driven enforcement of cultural norms is leading to a more homogeneous, community-focused parenting standard throughout the region. Imagine a scenario where a parent, let's call him Jason in Columbus, Ohio, is a highly successful entrepreneur who travels extensively. He provides incredible financial support, but the social capital audit shows he is a ghost in his own zip code. In 2026, Jason's financial success can actually work against him. The court may view his high travel, high success lifestyle as a direct threat to the child's social continuity. The algorithm will show that Jason has 0 local volunteer hours and no documented interactions with the local school board. Meanwhile, his spouse, who may earn significantly less, has a reputation score in the 90th percentile due to her deep roots in the local community. The statistical reality is that in 2026, the Midwest is choosing the community anchor over the high-earning provider. Furthermore, the 2026 audit captures what we call sentiment cascades. The algorithm can analyze the way your name is mentioned in local digital spaces over a 5-year period. If there is a downward trend in how your community perceives you, perhaps due to a publicized legal dispute or a social media controversy, the algorithm records this as a loss of social liquidity. In the Midwest, where your reputation is your currency, a loss of social liquidity is treated with the same seriousness as a loss of financial assets. The court views a parent with a tarnished community reputation as a parent who cannot effectively advocate for their child within the local social and educational systems. The most startling data point from 2026 is the correlation between social capital and post-divorce economic recovery. Midwesterners with higher reputation scores are statistically 25% more likely to maintain their pre-divorce income levels within 3 years of the split. This is because a high reputation score often correlates with a robust local support network that provides job leads, childcare assistance, and emotional stability. The legal system recognizes this, and in states like Iowa and Missouri, we are seeing judges use these scores to determine the duration and amount of spousal maintenance. The logic is that a person with high social capital is less likely to need long-term financial support because they have the communal resources to rebound faster. As we look at the implications of the social capital audit, it becomes clear that the Midwestern divorce is no longer just a legal separation. It is a community assessment. You are being judged not just on who you are as a spouse but on who you are as a citizen. This hyperlocal scrutiny is creating a new class of winners and losers in the family court system, based entirely on their ability to integrate and maintain a positive social presence. But as your social standing is being quantified, another even more personal metric is being tracked in the background, one that has to do with how you rebuild your life after the gavel falls. The 2026 data is revealing a bizarre phenomenon that social scientists are calling the remarriage paradox. While you would think that people who have gone through a data-driven forensic divorce would be hesitant to enter another legal union, the Midwest is seeing a massive surge in a very specific type of partnership. However, this is not about love, it is about a new kind of statistical insurance. In the next part, we are going to explore the rise of the aligned union. You will learn how Midwesterners are now using pre-divorce compatibility algorithms before they even go on a second date, and why the 2026 marital risk score is the new credit score for the dating world. If you think dating in your 30s and 40s was hard before, Part 8 will show you just how high the data stakes have become. In 2026, the Midwestern dating market is no longer driven by serendipity, it is governed by the Marital Risk Score, or MRS. Imagine a character named Robert in Des Moines, Iowa. Robert is 42, a successful actuary who went through a grueling divorce in 2023 that saw 45% of his retirement assets liquidated and a permanent alimony order established under Iowa's traditional support guidelines. When Robert decided to re-enter the dating scene in 2026, he didn't just download a standard app. He subscribed to a premium verification service that generates a marital risk score based on a person's legal and financial residue. The marital risk score functions like a credit score for your personal life. It aggregates data from the digital audit we discussed in Part 6 and the social capital audit from Part 7. In the 2026 Midwest, if you have a history of high conflict litigation, multiple contempt of court filings, or a low reputation score in your local community, your MRS reflects that. Robert's score was a respectable 740 out of 850, primarily because he settled his previous divorce through mediation rather than a trial, and he maintained a consistent child support payment history. Robert meets Emily, a 39-year-old marketing director from Omaha, who is also a veteran of the Midwestern family court system. In 2026, their first date isn't just about chemistry. It's about a concept we call reciprocal vetting. Before they even finish their first coffee, they have both performed a light discovery on each other. This is a historical trend that has exploded across the Great Lakes and Plains states. In a region where the cost of a second mistake can lead to total financial ruin, Midwesterners are treating romance with the same analytical rigor as a corporate merger. This has led to the rise of the aligned union. In 2026, an aligned union is a remarriage specifically designed to mitigate the risks of the previous divorce. The data shows that second marriages in the Midwest in 2026 are actually 18% more stable than first marriages, but only when they follow a specific data matching protocol. This protocol involves the mandatory exchange of what we call transparency folders. Robert and Emily didn't just talk about their pasts. They exchanged encrypted access to their 2025 tax returns, their current credit reports, and their MRS summaries. Historical trends in 2026 suggest that the succession pattern for these aligned unions involves a heavy reliance on the Pre-Relationship Disclosure Agreement, or PRDA. This is a non-binding but socially significant document where both parties outline their non-negotiables regarding child rearing, asset commingling, and career-based relocation. In the 2026 Midwest, where the interstate custody trap we discussed in Part 5 is a constant fear, the PRDA, acting as a precursor to a formal prenuptial agreement, has become a standard cultural practice among the divorced population. Let's look at the specific data regarding the Economic Defense League. This is a term sociologists use to describe divorced Midwesterners who remarry primarily to pool their diminished assets. In 2026, the single-person tax in cities like Minneapolis or Chicago has reached a point where maintaining two separate middle-class households is statistically impossible for many. By entering an aligned union, Robert and Emily can consolidate their housing costs, share the logistical burden of multi-state custody schedules, and leverage their combined social capital to improve their reputation scores. The data indicates that aligned unions in the Midwest see a 30% increase in discretionary income within the first 24 months of cohabitation, compared to those who remain single. However, there is a dark side to the marital risk score, the permanent outsider. Imagine a character named Marcus in Detroit. Marcus has a high income as a specialized engineer, but his MRS is a 410. Why? Because during his divorce in 2024, he was found in wasteful dissipation of assets, and he has 3 outstanding order to show cause filings for late parenting time arrivals. In the 2026 Midwest, Marcus is a statistical pariah. High MRS individuals like Emily and Robert will not even appear in his search results on verified dating platforms. We are seeing the emergence of a dated tier in the Midwestern social hierarchy, where individuals with low scores are forced into unverified dating pools that carry significantly higher risks of financial and legal volatility. Case studies from 2025 and 2026 in Ohio show that this litigation trigger in the MRS is the most difficult thing to repair. If you have been labeled a high-conflict litigant by a judge in a previous case, that tag follows you in the algorithm for 7 to 10 years. This has created a new industry in the Midwest, MRS rehabilitation. There are now consultants who help divorced individuals reindex their social capital by volunteering for specific community boards or taking court-certified high-conflict parenting classes to slowly tick their score back up. The 2026 Marital Risk Score also incorporates what we call the Geographic Stability Index. If you live in a border city like Kansas City or Cincinnati and have a history of trying to relocate with children across state lines, your risk score drops. The algorithm views you as a flight risk, which makes you a less attractive partner for anyone who wants a stable, long-term aligned union. This is the Midwest way of self-correcting for the jurisdictional chaos we explored in earlier parts of this masterclass. Furthermore, we are seeing the rise of the Smart Prenup in 2026. These are digital-first legal documents that are integrated with the couple's joint and separate bank accounts via API. If certain conditions are met, such as one partner's debt exceeding a specific threshold or a significant drop in their social capital score, the Smart Prenup automatically adjusts the distribution of marital funds in real time. It is a proactive legal shield that replaces the wait-and-see approach of the past. In 2026, nearly 25% of new marriages in the Michigan-Illinois-Wisconsin triangle include some form of algorithmic asset protection. Step by step, the path to an aligned union in 2026 involves: first, the data audit, where both parties verify each other's MRS. Second, the PRDA phase, where non-negotiables are documented. Third, the financial simulation, where the couple uses AI to project their combined post-divorce recovery over a 10-year window. Only after these steps are completed do most Midwesterners in this demographic move toward a formal engagement. This is romance in the age of analytics, and while it may seem cold, the potential outcome is a level of domestic stability that the Midwest hasn't seen since the 1950s. But as these new unions are being formed with surgical precision, a massive infrastructure is operating behind the scenes to profit from every single click, filing, and audit. We have talked about the parents, the children, and the new partners. But what about the ones who are actually building the algorithms? What about the divorce industrial complex that has turned the heartbreak of the heartland into a multi-billion-dollar data commodity? In the next part, we are going to expose the hidden economy of the Midwestern divorce. You will learn how law firms, software developers, and even divorce recovery coaches are using your 2026 data to create a perpetual cycle of litigation and rehabilitation. We will reveal the settlement algorithm that determines exactly how long your case should last to maximize profit for the system while keeping you just happy enough to stay in the game. If you think the valuation gap was the only way you were losing money, Part 9 will show you the hidden system tax that is draining the Midwest dry. The hidden system tax is the invisible drain on Midwestern wealth that has accelerated throughout 2026. While most participants in a divorce focus on the visible costs, the retainer fees for attorneys and the immediate division of bank accounts, the real financial erosion occurs in the digital infrastructure that now facilitates the process. In the 2026 Midwestern legal ecosystem, we have transitioned from billable hours to billable data events. This shift has created a divorce industrial complex where every interaction, every search, and every forensic inquiry carries a microtransactional cost that aggregates into a massive regional economic burden. Consider the case study of Derek, an operations manager in Indianapolis. Derek's divorce in 2026 seemed straightforward until the discovery phase began. In the previous decade, discovery involved physical copies of documents. In 2026, Derek's law firm utilized a platform called Juris Analytics, a SaaS tool that is now standard across Indiana and Ohio. Juris Analytics charges not by the hour, but by the data processing unit or DPU. Every time the software pings Derek's bank via an API, every time it scrapes his social media for the social capital audit we discussed in Part 7, and every time it runs a sentiment analysis on his text messages, a DPU fee is generated. Over a 6-month period, Derek's digital discovery toll amounted to $8,400, money that never went to a lawyer's time, but simply to the cloud computing costs of the legal tech stack. This is the first layer of the hidden system tax, the automation premium. While technology was supposed to make divorce more efficient and affordable, historical trends in 2026 show the opposite. Because the barrier to search has been lowered, legal teams now search everything. If it only costs $50 in DPUs to run a forensic check on a spouse's Amazon history, the lawyer will do it. This leads to a data bloat, where thousands of pages of irrelevant digital residue are generated, all of which must then be reviewed by a human attorney at their standard hourly rate. In the Midwest, where the median household income in 2026 sits near $72,000, a $15,000 digital discovery bill represents a catastrophic loss of marital equity. The second layer is the settlement algorithm. In 2026, many Midwestern jurisdictions have begun using judicial predictive modeling to manage their caseloads. This is a system that analyzes the specifics of a case, assets, children, and the marital risk scores of both parties to predict the probable outcome of a trial. While this sounds efficient, it creates a conflict loop. Law firms use their own versions of these algorithms to determine the point of maximum leverage. Imagine a scenario where a character named Sarah in Columbus, Ohio, is told by her legal tech platform that her settlement probability increases by 12% if she continues litigation for another 90 days. The algorithm isn't suggesting this because it's better for Sarah. It's suggesting it because the data shows the other party is likely to reach emotional exhaustion at that specific timestamp. The emotional exhaustion metric is a real data point used by the divorce industrial complex in 2026. It tracks the frequency of communication between a client and their attorney. When the client stops asking questions and starts simply agreeing to terms, the algorithm flags them as settlement ready. This allows the system to maximize billable conflict right up to the edge of a client's breaking point, then pivot to a settlement exactly when the financial and emotional reserves are depleted. In 2026, the average contested divorce in Illinois settles exactly 11 days after the legal fees surpass 20% of the total liquid assets of the marriage. This statistical precision is not a coincidence. It is a designed outcome of the predictive models. Furthermore, we must address the volatility premium in the 2026 credit market. In the Midwest, where banking and insurance algorithms are hyper-integrated with public records, the mere filing of a petition for dissolution of marriage triggers an automatic risk flag on your credit profile. Even if your payments are on time, the 2026 historical trends show that divorcees in Michigan and Wisconsin often see their credit card interest rates climb by 2 to 4 percentage points within 60 days of a filing. The banks view the transition from one household to two as a period of extreme default risk. This shadow tax can cost a Midwesterner an additional $3,000 to $5,000 in interest over the duration of the legal proceedings. The third layer of the system is the rehabilitation economy. As we discussed in Part 8, the marital risk score has created a secondary market for score optimization. In 2026, Companies in cities like Minneapolis and Des Moines offer MRS repair kits. These are subscription-based services that cost $200 a month and provide court-certified, co-parenting workshops, financial responsibility certifications, and community engagement logs. While these services can provide potential outcomes of a higher score, they represent another mandatory expense for anyone wishing to remain competitive in the 2026 social and dating hierarchy. We are seeing a trend where Midwesterners are spending 5% of their post-divorce income just to maintain the digital credentials required to prove they are rehabilitated in the eyes of the algorithm. Step by step, the hidden system tax extracts value through API aggregation fees during the initial data pull, forensic anomaly detection, surcharges for every red flag the AI identifies, predictive modeling fees used to strategize the timing of settlement offers, credit volatility premiums charged by third-party lenders, reputation management subscriptions required for post-divorce life. The 2026 data reveals that for every $1 spent on an actual attorney in the Midwest, an additional $0.65 is spent on the underlying data infrastructure. This is the real reason why, despite the technological advancements of the last decade, the cost of divorce has not decreased. The system has simply become more forensically dense. In 2026, you aren't just paying for a legal resolution. You are paying to feed a data-hungry machine that treats your personal tragedy as a high-frequency trading event. Consider the data brokerage aspect. In several Midwestern states, the anonymized data from your divorce, the spending patterns, the conflict triggers, and the settlement numbers, is sold to insurance companies and marketing firms to better predict the behavior of single-parent households and separated individuals. Your divorce is literally being used to train the algorithms that will then target you with higher insurance premiums or specific consumer goods. In the 2026 Midwest, you are not the customer of the divorce system. You are the product. As we look at the wreckage left behind by this hidden system tax, a final haunting question remains. If the data is so perfect, if the algorithms are so precise, and if the costs are so high, why are the trends still moving in this direction? There is one final variable that the algorithms cannot fully account for: a human glitch that is currently being observed in the most successful 1% of Midwestern families. They are doing something that defies the 2026 data wars, something that allows them to bypass the hidden system tax entirely and protect their legacy from the divorce industrial complex. In the final part of this deep dive masterclass, we are going to reveal the exit protocol of the elite. You will learn the specific legal and social strategy being used in the wealthy enclaves of Lake Forest, Illinois, and Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, to achieve total privacy in a world of total transparency. We will provide the final synthesis of the 2026 Midwestern divorce landscape and the one decision that determines whether you become a victim of the statistics or a master of your own data future. If you want to know how the invisibles survived the 2026 system, Part 10 is the only map you need. The final strategy employed by the highest tier earners in the American Midwest is known as the privacy firewall, or the elite exit. While the general public in 2026 is being processed through the automated digital audits and social capital algorithms we have discussed throughout this masterclass, a very different set of historical trends is emerging in enclaves like Lake Forest, Illinois, and Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. These individuals, whom social scientists now call the invisibles, have figured out how to bypass the divorce industrial complex entirely by leveraging a combination of private adjudication and jurisdictional shielding. To understand how they do it, we must look at the specific legal mechanics that allow the wealthy to stay off the grid while the rest of the heartland is being digitized. Imagine a case study involving a character named James Thompson, a high-net-worth executive in Lake Forest. James and his spouse have a marital estate valued at over $50 million. In a standard 2026 Illinois divorce, James would be subjected to the forensic narrative engine, and his every transaction would be scraped for the hidden system tax. However, James utilizes a strategy called private adjudication. In 2026, the historical trend among the Midwestern elite is to bypass the public court system entirely by hiring a retired judge to act as a private arbitrator. This is not just mediation. It is a legally binding process where the entire trial takes place in a private law firm office rather than a public courthouse. The first step in the James Thompson protocol is the sealing of the digital residue. Because the case is handled privately, none of the financial data, social capital scores, or smart home logs ever enter the public record. In the 2026 Midwest, Public filings are a goldmine for data brokers who feed the marital risk score algorithms. By opting for private adjudication, James ensures his MRS remains unaffected because the data scraping bots used by insurance companies and banks have nothing to ingest. This single decision protects James from the volatility premium and the credit interest spikes that hit middle-class divorcees in cities like Des Moines or Indianapolis. Furthermore, we have to examine the trust shield. Historical trends in 2026 show that the most successful asset protection strategies in the Midwest involve the use of domestic asset protection trusts, or DAPs, established in states like South Dakota or Ohio. James Thompson didn't wait for a separation to protect his assets. 5 years prior, he moved the majority of his non-marital and early marital wealth into an irrevocable trust with the third-party trustee. By the time the 2026 valuation gap became a factor, those assets were legally no longer in his name. In the eyes of the Illinois court, those funds are a separate entity, making them nearly impossible to reach in a standard distributive award. This is the ultimate defense against the wasteful dissipation claims that often drain Midwestern family businesses. But what about the social capital audit? How do the Invisibles protect their reputation scores? They use a technique called automated philanthropy. James Thompson's family office manages a private foundation that makes regular, scheduled donations to local Midwestern volunteer organizations, food banks, and youth programs. These transactions are recorded in the public square, ensuring that his community witness algorithm score remains in the 95th percentile at all times. While a middle-class parent in Ohio has to physically show up to coach Little League to keep their score up, the elite are outsourcing their social capital through high-impact financial integration. It is a cynical but highly effective way to dominate the 2026 custody landscape. Consider the imagine-if scenario of the 2026 middle-class trap. Imagine if a middle-class character named Sarah in Naperville tries to mimic James Thompson's strategy. Sarah doesn't have the $50,000 retainer required for a top-tier private judge. She is forced into the public system, where her data becomes a commodity. The potential outcome for Sarah is a 3-year legal battle that costs her 30% of her net worth in system taxes. Meanwhile, James Thompson settles his private divorce in 6 weeks, pays a $10,000 fee to his private judge, and retains 98% of his asset base. This is the Great Divorce Divide of 2026, one system for the data-rich and another for the data-poor. Step by step, the elite exit protocol involves the preemptive establishment of a domestic asset protection trust, DAPT, the execution of an aligned union agreement years before a crisis occurs, the immediate move to private adjudication the moment a separation is initiated, the sealing of all forensic records to prevent marital risk score degradation. As we synthesize everything we have learned in this 10-part deep dive, the statistical overview of the Midwest region in 2026 tells us a profound story. We have seen how the valuation gap in Missouri can bankrupt a business owner. We have seen how the interstate custody trap in Kansas City can uproot a family in 48 hours. We have seen how the social capital audit in Minnesota has turned neighbor against neighbor, and how the marital risk score has turned the dating world into a high-stakes credit check. The Midwest is no longer just the anchor of values. It is the frontier of forensic family law. The data is clear. The American Family Unit in 2026 is being redesigned by algorithms that value stability over sentiment and data over drama. Whether you are in the Silicon Prairie or the Rust Belt, your marital outcome is increasingly a reflection of your digital hygiene and your ability to navigate the hidden system tax. The Midwest has become a laboratory where the future of the American social contract is being written. If the historical trends of 2024 to 2026 continue, we will see a permanent bifurcation of the region, one where the Invisibles maintain their legacy through private law, while the rest of the population is managed through social continuity algorithms. This masterclass has been designed to give you the data-driven context you need to understand this shift. You now know that a divorce in 2026 is not an event, it is a multi-year data stream. You understand that the one decision that determines your future is not who you marry, but how you manage the data that your marriage generates. The Midwest metric is real, and it is the most powerful predictor of success in the modern American landscape. As we conclude this series, we must look toward the horizon. While the Midwest has been the focus of our 2026 overview, a new and even more complex statistical anomaly is forming in the southern United States. We are seeing the rise of climate-triggered dissolution and a new form of insurance-based custody that is set to redefine the Sun Belt. The lessons you have learned here about data sovereignty and the elite exit are just the beginning of your journey into the new American reality. In our next deep dive series, we are going to travel south to investigate the Sunbelt surge. You will see how the 2027 property insurance crisis is already causing a record-breaking spike in divorce filings in Florida and Texas, and why the homestead loophole is the only thing standing between thousands of families and total economic collapse. If you thought the Midwestern system tax was aggressive, the Southern liquidation will show you just how fast the rules can change. You need to be prepared for the next wave of statistical shifts that are already moving across the country.